Welcome to the Lady K podcast. I'm Katy McKinney, the founder and head of school for Lafayette Academy, a classical school. And today we're going to talk about what it takes to build a school. I have often gotten the question, first off, why are you so crazy to start a school? But secondly, then they say, I've actually never met someone who's done that. How do you do that? So I was recently on the Hillsdale College podcast, and this is the topic we discussed. So I thought, you know what, let's do that here as well, since I've gotten the question. And to be honest with you, we need more classical schools. And if this is at all lingering in your heart, or you thought, what if, maybe this will be helpful. So we'll kind of talk about that today. So a little bit about my background. I used to be a public school teacher in California. That's where I started. Taught first grade and kindergarten there. And then my husband and I moved to New Mexico, where I again taught in first grade. Throughout those years, I became what's called a reading recovery specialist. That is someone who helps teach students who are behind in reading and gain the knowledge so that they can go from I remember one of our students went through the program. In first grade, they only knew 6 letters of the alphabet. And in about 16 weeks, we were able to get them to fluency, which was tremendous. And it was a great program. So that was a good foundation for me in those beginning years. And then as we came back to St. Louis, started our family, and then I began homeschooling. And it was really through homeschooling that I found the classical avenue of education, did not know it existed. And a few of the token books that really I credit to opening my eyes to a new avenue of thinking and of educating was Thomas Jefferson Education by Oliver DeMille. That is not classical education per se, but it did open my eyes to new avenues of education. And it's more of an apprentice model. The other one, though, that was really catapulted me in this direction was cultural literacy, and that's by E.D. Hirsch. And that really opened my eyes to understanding the idea that our country has its own paideia. And if you're not familiar with that word, what that is sort of the essence of a thing. An essence, a family has its own paideia. It's its own culture, its own flavor, its own atmosphere. And as Americans, we have our own paideia. Some of the things I think that are intrinsic to Americans would be that we don't mind being the underdog as long as we win. We do like winning. We are not afraid of a fight. We have, in times past, we had families grounded in faith and in loyalty to family. And some would argue that maybe we're drifting from that a bit. That could be, but I would hope that that's still part of our paideia. I think a lot of us do still adhere to that, knowing that the family nucleus is a key to flourishing here in the States. So in any case, there's certain things that make up who we are, and to that point, cultural literacy is the passing of that knowledge from generation to generation, such that we maintain and preserve the principles that enabled us to obviously begin the United States of America and hopefully continue to propagate it. So to that end, in terms of my own background, through homeschooling, I did find the classical avenue of education, and it opened my eyes to realize how much I did not know. And this was probably 15, 20 years ago now, and really caused me to think, I don't want that for my own children. My husband and I would attend different seminars about American history or just about classical education, and we kind of look at each other saying, did you know that? No, did you? No, we didn't. Why did we not know this? It's because our country was founded. Much of it was classical education from our founders and all the way through the late 1800s. And about 1920, 1930, our country began to take a little turn away from that cultural literacy that had been embedded in our society and began, for example, phonics. We had taught phonics all the way through those many years. And then in the 1920s and 30s, we began to do what's called whole language. That's a whole nother debate. But in any case, we are now 100 years away from that small little turning point. And we find ourselves, I would say, miles away in education from what we quote, grew up with. Not me personally grew up, but our country grew up with. And we have, a very high illiteracy rate in this country. And I would target the fact that we have not been teaching phonics for now almost 100 years. And that has definitely influenced our culture. So to that end, classical education had kind of gone dormant. It's had a resurgence, I would say, over the last 20 years. And homeschooling has obviously taken off. Classical schools are taking off. Hence, the reason I wanted to talk about this today is that if one was ever thinking about starting a school, and I would suggest a classical school, it covers all myriad of gaps in education, and it just goes above and beyond. And our kids are so capable, and it's just an amazing avenue for both the adults and for the children. Those experiences, both teaching in public, I also taught in a private school, I also homeschooled. All of these avenues helped prepare me to start a school. Although I will say, just like being a parent, nothing truly prepares you until you're in the trenches. But, it gave me a start. So what first stirred in me to start a school? I would say that through homeschooling, through being a part of both public and private education, I found myself wanting. In homeschooling, I knew I could deploy excellent academics, and we could nurture excellent character. But when I would go to a private school, let's say, maybe they were good in character, but they suffered in the academics, or vice versa. And I couldn't find both married together. And I thought, this is not rocket science. We can do both. I could do it in my own home, but I also knew I had shortcomings, and I didn't want my own children to suffer as a result of my own shortcomings. I'm working to shore those gaps up, but we don't need to pass that to the next generation. So all that to say, I was in church one day, and I was really reaching out that day because I felt like the private schools were failing us, the public schools were failing us, my kids were going to get older inevitably, and I just wanted to find an avenue. Well, the prayer I threw out there was, God, I want two things. I want excellence in character and excellence in academics. Where else can I find that but at home? And then I thought, if Hillsdale College had a K through 12 education, that would be, and I quote myself, that would be the cream of the crop. And right after that, I heard a voice say, check the internet. And I said, no, it's not. Hillsdale College doesn't have that program. And the voice said again, check the internet. So obediently, I went home after church that day. I checked the internet, and sure enough, this is in 2014, mind you now, summertime. No, it was November 2014. I checked the internet. I saw that they had started the Barney Charter School Initiative, which I believe they started roughly 2012. So it had been in existence for a couple of years. I had no clue Hillsdale was doing this. I just knew that they, at the college level, they emulated those same principles, those same virtues that I was looking for in the K through 12. Needless to say, I absolutely believe and felt that it was a providential message to see what Hillsdale was doing. And as soon as I saw that on the website that day, it was a Sunday afternoon, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I called the office Monday morning. I said, is this for real? They said, yes, it's for real. At the time, they were starting a charter school model. After researching for 18 months, I found out Missouri, at that time, they did not, and they still don't have a charter school model unless you're in the city of St. Louis or Kansas City, neither of which were options for us. So we had to go the private route. And over that 18-month period of searching, just researching, soul searching, just all of these things that you think, okay, is this really something I want to do? My heart was still in it. I was constantly asking, is this the right avenue, God? Is this what needs to happen? The answer kept coming, yes, yes, yes. And so I told Hillsdale, we want to do this. My husband and I want to do this, but we have to go private if we're going to do that, which means it's a different funding model. Just for clarity, a charter model is funded by public school dollars, and the private model is funded by tuition dollars. If you go private, you're going to have donations as well to offset the expenses, especially initially until you can grow, big enough to be sustainable. So in any case, we had to go private, and Hillsdale said, that's not that's not in our model at this time, but we'll do whatever we can to support you. Great. So 2016, filed the business license, got things going, got the 501c3 underway. That's the legal designation to be a nonprofit so that we could receive donations. Anyway, and there we were starting a school. So how did I first become connected with Hillsdale? That's how it was. Honestly, I think it's through prayer. It was a message. I was an obedient servant to say, okay, I will call and find out. And sure enough, it was the pathway that I needed. Some of the earlier barriers that I faced when trying to start school, one was just this idea, do we go charter, do we go private? We figured out eventually private was the right way to go. Another one was simply just explaining the idea. Back in 2014, 2015, classical education was just unheard of. Many people did not know what it was. So let me educate you about this product that I think you need, and then let me educate you as to why I think you need it. And so I remember sitting down with one of our first prospective parents who had a daughter, and my sweet sister-in-law, who was hook, line, and sinker, excited about this idea, said, I really think you should talk with them. Okay, great. So we met at Panera's, we sat down, and I'm explaining, I don't even have the school open yet, but I'm explaining what the curriculum would look like. I'm explaining the virtues, the 4 classical virtues of temperance, prudence, justice, and fortitude. And those virtues wouldn't come out of my mouth. Maybe 1 or 2 came out, and then I stumbled. I was like, we have 4 virtues. I just can't remember them all. And at the end of that coffee, I remember I'm like, call to action. So I'm like, is this something, that you think you would consider? And she's like, yeah, probably not. In my head, I was thinking, yeah, I would probably not do it either, considering the pathetic presentation I just received. So it was one of those moments where it's like, I am a fool to start this. What am I thinking? I can't even rattle off the 4 darn virtues that were going to be, part of our curriculum. And it was like, do I do this? Do I not? And if I do it, then I got to step it up. So I did. I made sure I understood frontwards and backwards those virtues. I practiced my presentation, and I kept at it. And that year we started with 9 students, and my kids were 30% of the school that year. Another barrier was finding a school. We looked at every church, every empty building, how can we afford it, all of those things. And because we didn't have any money yet. And we found an old Jump for Fun. It was a warehouse that was about 2,400 square feet, no windows, except for the front, the window, the front part of the store. And then it was in a warehouse, and there were no walls. It was just a nice, long, narrow, straight shot of a space. And the floor had stars and confetti all over it, so it was nice and loud. And it was perfect. It was perfect. We put up partition walls. The chalkboards, yes, we had chalkboards. They were on the floor because we had no walls to hang them on. And so literally my kids would be on their knees, writing out their math problems on the board, or I would too. We would be able to clearly hear what was happening in the kindergarten classroom, and I was teaching 3rd through 7th. And so it was a very homeschooly kind of atmosphere. We cleaned the school ourselves because we couldn't afford cleaners. So every Friday we'd reserve 30 minutes towards the end of the day, and people would be vacuuming. We taught the kids how to clean the toilets, the sinks, and sweep and empty trash, clean off the whiteboard or the chalkboards, clean the desks. It was very homey, but it was working. It was great. And obviously funding, that was another big trying time. And actually getting the 501c3, that was also trying. Quick story on the 501c3. We had filed, it's about a 75 to 80 page document. We turn it into the IRS, and then the IRS says basically, don't contact us, we will contact you, and it will be at least 180 days, 6 months. Great. Well, on the 181st day, we called the IRS, and my chairman did, and I don't know what happened, but they ended up hanging up on him. And I was like, oh gosh, that wasn't a good sign. And nobody hangs up on our chairman. He's the nicest guy. But in the end, the other part was we had donors who had given us upwards of maybe $75,000, but they couldn't technically give it to us until that 501c3 was approved, and cash flow was getting very tight. Obviously, we had tuition coming in, 3 teachers, and rent and electric to pay, water to pay. It was getting very concerning, and I was very worried. And I, like a good Christian, I was praying my heart out. And one of the thoughts that came to me as I was just trying to calm the fear was that, I was not pleased with the IRS. They were not being a team player in my eyes. And I was thinking, I'm going to call them and I'm going to tell them how important this is, and they really should do this for us and all of this. And in my prayers, what I found happened was my heart yielded. I got very humble, And the thought came to me, the IRS is trying to enforce, obviously, legal statutes, legal documents to help ensure a sense of justice, right? If they are about justice, and our school is about justice, one of our virtues is justice, and then all of a sudden it hit me, we're on the same team. We're not at odds with one another. And in fact, we are one in that idea of justice. With that thought came an overwhelming sense of love for the IRS. I've never put IRS and love in the same sentence, but in this case, I truly felt a sense of gratitude, a sense of unity and teamwork with them. And then instead of me calling them and kind of reading them the riot act, instead I thought, I'm just going to call them and say thank you. Thank you for doing your job. Thank you for looking at our file if and when it happens this week or 6 months from now. I just was trusting that this was going to work out. Well, at the time I was full-time head of school, full-time teaching. Needless to say, time was not something I had a plenty of supply of. And so I never got around to calling them. The day after I got this inspiration, the day went by and I was so jam-packed I couldn't call them. The next day, I couldn't call them. So that second or third day, I was checking my emails during a very quick break. And lo and behold, I had gotten an email from the IRS and it said, you're approved. Here's your EIN number and we're done. That was a major moment because it allowed the flood tide of those funds to come through just literally in the nick of time. And it was my first kind of moment where it was like, okay, this is a good idea to start a school. This is, and truly my prayer in the very start of it was that, I just want to be close to my father, whether I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, which I had been and I loved, whether I was homeschooling, whether I was teaching, whether I was starting a school, wherever it was, I just wanted to have alignment with my father. And that enabled us to have that opportunity to start a school has afforded that tenfold, 70-fold. The first the first 15 to 18 months of preparation, obviously we had to find a school. We found a space 3 weeks, as I mentioned to you, the place with no walls and no windows. 3 weeks before school was to open, we secured that lease. So that was wonderful. We needed books. We needed desks and chairs and chalkboards and obviously all the curriculum and students and all of this. We needed a website. All of those things came forth just as we needed them. All the furniture came from Facebook Marketplace. Some of it was free. Some of it was darn cheap. Books, we've got plethora of books for our library. Many of them were gifts. Almost all of them were gifts. We had to purchase our American flag, which we were happy to do. Just everything we needed made its appearance as we needed it, and that was really lovely. So starting a school from scratch, finding the families, securing the building, raising the funds, hiring the teachers. I will say finding the families, what was lovely about that was I held informational meetings at coffee houses, at libraries, at my house, and just continued to talk about the vision, talk about what Hillsdale was doing, why this was so important for me. It was the main reason was fighting for my country. What am I fighting for? I'm fighting for the liberty of man, the opportunity to be self-governed, the opportunity for us to preserve the freedoms that we are given in the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. Those are crucial to the flourishing of man. And so that is my why. That for me was that message was being shared with families. Throughout that first 12 months, I would go to Caldi's, which is a coffee shop here in town, and would drop off my kids. That was one year they were in public school. I couldn't homeschool them, which killed me, but I was like, just bear with me. I've got a year. I've got to build this. And I was totally on my own. The kids go to school. My little guy went to preschool. I would work for 4 or 5 hours in the coffee house and just figure it out. With Hillsdale's support, it was incredible. Were there any moments that were especially humbling and wondered if this would really work? I think the moment I shared about me totally flubbing up on the presentation, that was definitely not great. And of course, once you start the school, you have employees, cash flow is tight. Those are humbling moments where you're like, I don't know if this is going to go. And I would say that, just like Washington getting on his knees at Valley Forge, wondering if that fight was worth it. You don't know, but I think when you have faith in something that has a pure motive that is blessing mankind, you just keep going. And I will say, backing up, when I finally acquiesced to this idea to say, okay, we're going to do this, my prayer before really moving forward was, okay, God, if this is right, I will do this. Never having done this before, I will do this. But when the door closes and you say it's done, I will be done. And there was another humbling moment during COVID. Obviously, everything shut down in March. For us, it was in March. And schools shut down. We went virtual. That was incredibly intense, but it was incredibly effective. I think we ran a fabulous program online. But again, come June, people were saying, oh, are you going to be open or not? Where's the school going to be? Again, we had to find a new location because we had outgrown that space that year. So I was on the hunt for a location. Tuition was not coming in because people were kind of on the fence as we were on the fence. And I, again, on my knees, at one point sobbing. I don't know if I've ever cried that hard, but it was, I was like, okay, if this is the closing of the door, I'll be done. I didn't want to be done, but I would be done. And I literally had, it was kind of like putting the baby on the altar. It was just like, you just have to give it up. And lo and behold, a dear friend at the time had asked me, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And I said, if I weren't afraid, I would keep going. And then they said, well, then keep going. And it was then through a variety of avenues that a flood tide of funds came in. We found a location. We doubled in enrollment. Like everything was moving in the right direction. I was like, okay, here we go again. And so it was another beautiful moment, but that was very, very humbling. And then I would say, to anybody who's listening who feels dissatisfied with the educational avenues that are before you, or you're like, I'm loving homeschooling, we're doing a bang up job, but maybe come high school, I'm not sure if I'm fit for this. A couple thoughts. Or maybe you're not happy with your educational system, but you're not sure if you can homeschool or not. I would say if you can find the right supports, such as classical conversations that are in many chapters all across the United States, or looking up homeschooling co-ops in your town, if you can hook up with some of those, they can be phenomenal supports. That's what we did. In fact, I'm still a member of one of our homeschooling co-ops. Parents can homeschool. You have more credibility. You have more smarts about you than you probably recognize. And you could do it for a short time. You can do it for a long time. But I would say trust your instincts, trust yourself. The other component is to starting a school. I will be very honest, it is not for the faint of heart. The pressures are real. They can take a toll on you if you're not prepared. However, if you build a board that is supportive of you and the mission, that's number one. Number two, if you find that you can find the right families who are mission aligned, again, key component, that's essential. And then of course, finding the right teachers. When you can get those pieces right, you can do this. And I would highly recommend reaching out to Hillsdale College, the K-12 office. They have which is what we are currently, is a curriculum school. They will license you all the curriculum you need so that you can get this off the ground. They have a phenomenal team who they've been building this airplane as we're flying it. They didn't have that when I started with them. They have it now. The most incredible supports. I couldn't do this without them. And I am so grateful for the amazing teamwork, the amazing partnerships, the amazing friendships. Some of my dearest friends are through both Hillsdale and through our parents and our teachers that work with us. We're all rowing in the same direction. And it has been one of the most mission-centered, godly-centered, family-centered endeavors that I've ever done, and one of the most joyful. So I would highly encourage you, if you have it at all in your heart, to think about either homeschooling or starting a school, to trust yourself that with the team, the network that Hillsdale has brought to the table, you can do this. So to that end, if you have enjoyed this episode of the Lady K podcast, I invite you to share it with others, because great nations are renewed first, not in the courts or in the capitals, but in our classrooms, in our families, and in the hearts of our children. And to me, that is how we help preserve the promise of America. Thanks for joining me.